It's Aloha Authentic.
Hooey! Aloha and welcome to another episode of Aloha Authentic with Kamakapili. That's me. Before we get on today's show, I just want to talk about what is set up on the table because I always forget about it, so I'm getting the time now to talk about it. But on the table we have a bowl of poi and we have some poke to make you jealous that we're eating and that you may not be. But on top of that is also something that I was raised with from my tutu, always saying that when the bowl of poi is open on the table, at dinner table, that no negativity is spoken, and the only thing that you talk about is positive and good stories that make sure that all that mana and the energy that comes out doesn't spoil the poi when you eat it. So we're following that same context that what we're going to be sharing about today is going to be all positive and all about mo'olelo, about stories that are intended when the artist puts into the work. Jumping on that, today's artist, very special person to me because I get to work with him and future projects to come. HCRA, which is Hawaiʻi Culture and Retail Association. He is a member and a local artist of that. Robert King Andia.
Yeah, aloha kamaka.
Aloha, welcome for coming. Thank you very much for giving me the time.
Poi.
Oh no, so we're going to be eating throughout the show, so don't mind us. But today we're going to be sharing a little bit about his series that he just came out with, which is an amazing series from beginning to end, in my opinion. Ancient Hawaiʻi. If you haven't seen it, check it out. His website is hawaiiancient.com, so you can see what he has to offer in that series. And we're just going to get straight into it because we have very limited time. But this series, Ancient Hawaiʻi, what is it? Share a little bit about it.
Well, what it is it started, excuse me, when I was really young. I grew up with these stories, the legends of Hawaii, learning about the legends of Hawaii. And as an artist, when I was younger, I was an artist, and these things had always had a vision in my head. Mm-hmm. And I was able to look at these things in my head and figure out that this is how I would want to represent them if I represented them. So what this is, I went into photography and worked for many years around the world as a photographer. And so I incorporated that photography into these images. Mm-hmm. And this was the interpretation that we came out with these images. And so it's basically, it's the essence of the profound ancestors. We're not trying to do anything historical or make anything iconic. What we did was we took the legends and tried to take the essence of those legends and the profound ancestors of Hawaii, mm-hmm. and put them into a modern medium, okay. With the technological advances of Photoshop and photography and all the things that we have capable today with the digital world.
Okay, so I see we have this one pulled up, so if we can show the Pele picture. This is one of the most profound that I think has been pushed out from this series thus far. So this picture in particular is talking about Pele.
Right. So what we try to do in this picture is it really is about how Pele, if you read the legends, sometimes she's referred to as she who shapes the land. So what this is actually Pele, our interpretation of Pele, shaping the land. So coming out of her body, you see the new lava going mm-hmm. in, and you have the more porous lava down here. Mm-hmm. So she's actually continually shaping the land through her fiery activities and the volcanic eruptions and stuff like that.
Where did you get the inspiration for this? Because it looks so complicated. How do you have a final picture in your head what it's going to look like just by thinking about it and your thoughts?
Well, when we started the project, when I conceptualized the project, I put the storyboards together and drew out the storyboards like an artist would, or like any type of movie type of situation. Drew out the storyboards, and from there we just expanded upon that. Mm-hmm. And then we went and we shot the background locations, and then we incorporated the model and the other elements into the background locations. When we started shooting, we shot all the elements first, and we put them into a 3D program. I work with a photographer named Colin Anderson. He's a fantastic photographer out of Australia. He and I collaborated on the whole project. So from my conceptualization, we took that and we began the project together. He's the guy who does all the Photoshop work in there. Mm-hmm. He shot the fire elements. We both shot the lava elements, shot the, that is Mahina Garcia in that picture right there. And we shot the models separately at the end of the shoot, because then we could figure out where all the lighting was meant to be, mm-hmm. and how we're going to light her to incorporate her into the image. And then basically it just comes down to taking all the images and stitching them together. Mm-hmm. This probably has, I would say, probably over 400 images in it, actually.
And they're layered all one on top of the other.
Actually true photography. So it's actual pure photography, and then we just layer the image together and stitch everything together.
Have you seen any other piece prior to doing this that kind of follows that structure where you mix photography and graphics?
Well,
into
currently
one?
with the technology, there's a lot of stuff out there that mixes the digital technologies with Photoshop and all the imaging programs and softwares such as ZBrush, Photoshop, Illustrator. There's all types of different programs. And so there is stuff out there, but I've never seen anything this complex, actually, ever. And that's kind of the reaction that we're getting. A lot of professional photographers and artists are looking at this stuff and saying they've never seen anything that's comparable to this. I got a great compliment recently on one of the shows that we did where a gentleman compared our work to Herb Kane, and I just almost fell over. It's like, I don't think we're that good. But yeah, that was an extreme compliment to me.
Right on. So how long does it take that Pele picture, for example? How long did that take to create that?
Well, you'd have to figure that there was several days of shooting on that. There was a conceptualization on it. Of course, the research. When I first got into the project, I had a bunch of Hawaiian advisors. I brought on a bunch of Hawaiian advisors. And one of the first things one of my advisors did, who was Puakea Nogelmeyer, he said, okay, here's a list of books you have to read. So I had to read all the books and do the research
had
before.
homework.
So I spent about 6 to 8 months doing that. And then as far as after we shot the images and putting them all together, probably the Pele piece would have taken maybe 300 hours, I'm guessing, or something like that.
Gosh.
It was
And
pretty
you have the
technical.
patience for that whole
I didn't do the Photoshop work, Colin did. So, and yeah, there was a couple points in it where you're just trying to get it perfect.
Yeah.
And we would communicate back and forth, and he was getting like, oh my God, I'm pulling my hair out, and I'd say, well, we'll get there. And we at least had the end vision in mind.
Yeah. What was your beginning intention for this project?
Well, I think for me, I grew up in Hawaii, and over those years, I've seen the education of the culture, or the cultural education, fading away, and people not as involved as they used to be. And so what my intention is to create these images in a technology or a format or a medium that right now could go out there and visually impact people. I think that's the only way to really do it these days, is where you have something so profound that it's absolutely visually impactful. What that does is we're not trying to tell the story. What we're trying to do is we're trying to lead people from this visual to go and research the stories and look into these things, because if they look at the Pele piece and they go, wow, that's amazing, then hopefully they want to say, I want to learn more about that. So our goal going into this project was to introduce the world to some of these legends. And through the technology, we're able to do that, and through the shows that we're doing worldwide, or that we're planning to do worldwide, we're able to introduce these images and these legends to people around the world, and here home in Hawaii. For instance, our show at, you remember the show at the Honolulu Museum of Art that we just completed, and there was a lot of keiki going through there and looking at the images. So what we're doing is we're trying to inspire people to investigate these stories and to learn about these stories, because the one thing that we don't want to see is for these stories to fade away. I think these stories have significant importance, not just culturally, but also in a sustainability factor. I think the Hawaiian culture originally, as an ancient culture, was probably one of the most advanced cultures in the ancient times. And I think there's a lot of teaching in how they treated the land, and how they treated others, and how they, just what they did. I think we can learn a lot from that. I think right now that we live in kind of a microcosm of a very small period of time, maybe 20 years, where people are just looking at what we have right now, and they're forgetting about the past and the lessons that we can learn from the past. So I think that really was what we wanted to personify in this, and bring forward to people, and try and get them to learn about the old stories, and hopefully learn something from them.
So it seems like you have a lot of power. There's a lot of power behind these, and the intention that you put behind it is a lot. Has there been any obstacles or challenges that came with this project?
Oh, of course. Like I said, we had a advisory team of 6 Hawaiian advisors, all of them in different parts of the Hawaiian culture. So, that was really nice to have that, because that kind of helped us walk through the process. When we went through the editing process, they were able to come in and tell us what was what was Pono, what was not, what we needed to change about the images and that kind of thing. Of course, with any type of cultural interpretation, and that is what it is, it's interpretation from basically from my brain, the interpretation of those stories. So basically, when you do deal with cultural interpretations, you are going to have people who see the culture differently, you know, and even within the Hawaiian community, there's people who take a different view on some of the stories than other people do. So what we try to do, like I said, is we try to capture the essence. It wasn't about telling the history. The history has been written and told. So that's all out there for people to grasp onto and take what they want from that, to glean what they want from that. Whereas we just wanted to attract them to it and bring it to them. So when we talk about the essence, we're talking about taking several legends about that certain ancestor. So for instance, Pele takes several pieces from that, and there's even more complexity in some of the other images, but taking several pieces of that and putting it all together in one to try and show the essence of that personification.
Right on. Okay, so because I want to be able to show the audience as much as we can. So we have the Pele one. If we can bring up the La'iekawai picture. So this particular story is one of your favorites.
Yes.
And share a little bit of why. And how does that come across in your image?
I'm going to try and pull that up here real quick while we're talking. The story of La'iekawai is
just amazing.
To me, just it's probably one of the most, I don't know how to explain it, but in modern times I would say that it's a true romance story that would attract so many people to it. There's just a great story behind it. There's all kinds of elements to the story. And in the end, she comes out as kind of the heroine of the whole story, you know, and it's really nice where she comes from, how the story develops throughout the story. I mean, if I could, this is something that I would shoot a movie on, because it has all the elements of intrigue.
That was the first thing I thought of when I first seen your book. First thing is just like, you brought, because I already knew the context of what each picture talks about. I knew it was about our myths and our legends and our gods and goddesses. But I feel that with these, especially the La'iekawai, it brought it to such a level like Lord of the Rings or like Harry Potter, where a level that a multitude of people can really connect in just because it's attractive.
Right.
And then like what you were saying, attractive to like throw the bait and pull the fish in, to really show the importance of continuing and really research what this picture really represents. What is the story? What does it really talk about? Why do we want to perpetuate it? So when I seen it, that was the first thing. It's a movie. We should turn it into a movie.
Yeah, it actually involves so many cultural elements in ancient Hawaii, but and also natural elements because of where she lived in the Puna area, or where she was taken away to. Coming from Hawaii, going to there, it involves Kauai with the chief from Kauai. You know, there's just so many different things, magic to it. There's romance, and beautiful woman who was supposed to be one of the most beautiful women in Hawaii. I'm attracted to that.
Lucky job. Where's
yeah,
I did a good job.
Yeah, so I think you're completely correct. As this image alone, it actually almost looks like a still from a movie frame. You know, like, and you can kind of feel that story going in here, where we've introduced the birds that would sing around her and deter her suitors or potential suitors, all these different elements in this. So it's quite a wonderful story, the magic of I believe it's a priestess who was a mo'o who took her away, you know, and took care of her growing up and stuff. So I think that's, kind of says everything about it, you know.
So we have this one, and then what would you say is another one of your favorites, or one, maybe a hardest one that you had?
I think from discussions that Colin and I have had, the most difficult one was probably the coup piece. So I'll show you that. And I call them...
Maybe we can bring up the third picture? Yeah.
I call them by these names. However, they all have actual names to them as well, like the Pele piece is Forging Fire. We didn't want to call it Pele because we don't want people to just instantly think we're doing an image of Pele, like that's the iconic image of Pele. We didn't want to do that. So this one, the coup piece, is actually called Spirit Warrior, or Warrior Spirit, excuse me. I'm not very good at being on camera.
So one of my questions, and I've always wondered, because I mean, just looking at it, it's hard to see everybody's face, but that's the same person in this picture.
Yeah.
Wow.
So this image, I've just lost it here, but try and bring that back up. Okay. Yeah, so this was a really difficult image logistically and technically. So what we did with this image was we brought on an advisor who was La'akea Suganuma, who is pretty well known in the Hawaiian community. Of course, he is a lua master, and he creates these authentic Hawaiian weapons from the actual original artifacts. And he is the grandson of Mary Kavena Pukui and was raised with Mary Kavena Pukui.
Wow.
So he knows all these stories very well. But his main focus in the Hawaiian culture is the perpetuation of lua and the weaponry of Hawaii and that kind of thing. So this image alone, we shot the model in over 700 different poses.
Oh my gosh.
So
and how much days did that take?
That was a long shoot. That was one day. It was one whole afternoon. I can tell you that.
I quit.
Yeah, the model is Po My Brown, and he trains people at the UFC gym. And at the end of this shoot, he was very tired because there's a lot of really tight guttural stuff going on there. So we used about 120 different actual weapons, and he posed about 700 times. There's not one cloned image in this whatsoever.
Wow.
So what this image, though, represents, as you can see in the background, of course, Ku has many forms, but we chose to do the essence in the warrior form, or the god of war. So you can see Ku in the backgrounds in the clouds, and he's actually breathing out the mana into the warriors, right? And so that's why all the warriors have kind of taken on the personification of Ku. And so that's the way we created this image. I know that this image took over 800 hours in post-production to place all the warriors and make everything exact.
Wow. When did you initially start this project? Because if every picture, and you have, what, 15 pictures, took 800 hours?
Yeah, well, not every picture took that long, but it was a pretty fair amount of time to do the post on these things. What happened was about 10, 12 years ago, I had started on this. And this is before all the, that we had all the great technologies that we currently have. And Photoshop was just kind of fledgling at that time. So it didn't have all the updates and all the new stuff that it has in it that makes things easier to do. So I started on this about 10, 12 years ago, and I started working with some friends of mine. And it started taking on too much of a modernistic and a kind of hula personification. And I wanted to steer away from that because in my mind, I've got kind of a whacked out mind. Like, you know, I think in the terms of like Frank Frazetta and Roger Dean and Salvador Dali. Those are my favorite artists. So it wasn't looking like what I needed it to look like. It didn't have that magic. It didn't have that power. It didn't have the mana. It didn't have any of that I thought needed to be in there to represent these ancestors. So years later, I ended up having a great opportunity to meet Colin Anderson, and we were discussing photography and stuff about Hawaii, and I showed him some of the stuff that I had previously did, and he looked at that and said, what are you doing with this? And I said nothing. I was just kind of back chaired the project, and he said, well, this sounds amazing. He goes, I'd love to be involved with something like this, and that's when it first started. So coming from about 10, 12 years ago, and then coming to about 3 years ago, when we first started discussing the project. Then I went through all the research, doing all the storyboards, putting it all together. Colin came out, we shot the primary photography, so all the backgrounds, all the models, that kind of stuff. I continued on shooting when he went back to Australia, and he started working on all the post. So that process probably took, I would say, at least a year and a half in production to actually create the whole thing from the start of the storyboards to the finished product.
What has been, so you've been having these photos up in showcases lately.
Yeah.
What has been the reaction from the public in general?
Amazing.
Amazing.
It's absolutely been amazing. Yeah, we opened up, our debut was at the Honolulu Museum of Art, the Linikona building, I guess it's called the Art School. And we had an exhibition there that lasted a month, which is really cool as an artist too. I've never been a fine artist. I've always been a fashion and advertising photographer. But as an artist, to have your first project all of a sudden go into a museum setting was really cool to me. So we were there for a month, and then we moved the show. We're represented by Bill Weiland. And Bill Weiland's son, Brian Weiland, owns the Wise Gallery in Haleiwa. So they took us on. Bill Weiland represents us, and so they took us on. And now we're over at the Wise Gallery, and we just had a show out there a couple weeks ago, and it did fantastic.
Yeah.
I think the coolest thing about the show was that people who aren't from Hawaii, they were looking at it and they were amazed by it. And even first-time collectors, this is the first art piece they've ever bought, which really made me proud that they decided to buy this art piece, because if you go to Wise Gallery, the art there is amazing. I'm up there with some really good artists, not against them, but really, I'm in a pretty good group. So that was really cool to see, but also the Hawaiian crowd that came in, the local crowd, and the comments that they were making and how they really appreciated. One thing that I've heard so much is that a lot of the local people really appreciate that we made this effort to go out there and do this. When I explained to them the reasoning behind it and what we're trying to do with it, they have shaken my hands and said, I just really appreciate you doing this, you know, because they see it as kind of something that's, you know, that trying to attract people these days to get off their computers or to get off the games or anything like that, trying to attract them to go and research, go to the library, look at the books, whether you go on Google or whatever, look at the stories, right? Trying to get them to do that is pretty tough.
Yeah.
I mean, even getting my 11-year-old son to go read a book is pretty hard. So, but to be able to show them this image and then they get attracted to it and then to tell them the story, and then they just get so excited about it and they want to hear the story. So I actually tell them a little bit about the stories and tell them where they can find this stuff, where they can research it and actually find it.
Do you go and share with schools or kids in a greater amount?
That is a goal of ours. We have not done it as of yet. Really, by the time we got the project launched, everything ready to go, we were pretty much into the museum directly. So we were very busy with that. The images that we currently have are giant. They're, as you saw at the one show that we did at Portlock, they're huge. The 8-foot images, and they're.
Imagine looking at the picture that you just seen on your TV, but as the size of this whole studio, which can't even fit in the camera. But it's huge, but it's crystal clear.
Crystal clear.
Crystal clear.
Yeah, just the mediums that we're printing on with the Epson papers and the acrylic faces and the metals and stuff like that. It's amazing to look at it and look at the clarity, because there's so much depth when you stand in front of that 8-foot image and look at it.
Yeah.
So I've been moving images all over the place, as you know, when I was setting up at that one show.
Where do you get
That's
something
why I'm getting
printed? I need to change my job again. Where do you get something printed as something 8 foot long?
Well, we were actually
Incidents
trying to
and
do
stuff.
everything out of Hawaii, and we really made an effort to try and do everything out of here.
Right on.
But we actually have to print out of Los Angeles, and I think the images are actually printed in Texas.
Wow.
But our company that we go through is in Los Angeles. It was unfortunate because we looked at every lab out here, and every lab told us that they couldn't do something like this for us.
That scale.
And we needed it to have that scale, especially for the exhibition at the museum. We had to go large at the exhibition at the museum. You saw the room that we had to cover, so you had to make it pretty strong. So, yeah, it's unfortunate that we had to go out of Hawaii to do something, because I would have preferred to keep everything in Hawaii. But, you know, you have to do what you have to do. But other than that, all the models are Hawaiian. All the backgrounds are Hawaii. Everything in these images is Hawaiian.
Yeah.
So, and everybody we used or worked with, not used, that sounds bad. Everybody we worked with, we're in some form either involved in the Hawaiian culture or actually Hawaiian blood. So that was fantastic, except for, of course, me and Colin, we're both Haole guys. But, you know, so.
No, I mean, and that's one thing that at least I wanted to share, was that I understand, and and I know some people who are very critical when it comes to Hawaiian culture, because our culture is so special to us. But to see a Haole person to be able to pick up our culture and to be able to run with it with the same connection that, say, I would have, and be able to portray it and express it, but express it with a message for people to say, like, this is your culture, this is what you need to really dive deep in and really get to know and to learn. I am very appreciative for someone like you be able to bring a project like this to a level that I haven't seen a Hawaiian or non-Hawaiian thus far be able to bring our stories. So
It's a
that
big
being
compliment,
said,
but I get teary-eyed already.
appreciate. Well, I get napkins for you after. But that being said, I do want, because I do know that it's a difficult thing. An artist myself, doing cultural things and be able to share our culture with more of a Western world is a very touchy subject. But I know it's something that is necessary.
Yeah, I think if you consider ancient cultures, the only way that those cultures are going to sustain is by having the whole world involved in making sure that they're sustained. If you keep it closed in, it's not going to expand. The education's not going to expand. And the unfortunate thing is, I'm actually Cherokee Indian. So the unfortunate thing is you're going to have that thing where what happened with the Indians, it's pretty far gone, you know, as far as trying to bring that back. There's no renaissance in the Indian nation right now. So I just thought that being raised in Hawaii, my heart has always been here. Ever since I was a little kid, my dad's from here. My family's been here since, you know, late 20s. So it's something that's always been there. My grandfather really liked to express his love for Hawaii as well. So I think that the important thing for us, and as you talked about, I think having those people, though, who look at it and critique it, that also is good, because it creates those boundaries. And it says, look, you know, we like it, but you know, you've kind of stepped over some boundaries here and that kind of stuff. It's always hard to accept something when you have it in your mind, and then you have to accept it and look at it differently. So I think that's what we try to do, is just give a different interpretation.
Right on. Well, I really appreciate you being able to share that, and also word it as it is your artistic expression.
That's it.
That being said, it keeps an open mind for everybody else out there to look at these pictures, and you really be able to take the intention of Robert and his story into his work, but also be able to kind of connect with yourself to add your own story within it in a way for you to really be able to relate to what the story is in the picture. Anyways, I'm trying to hurry up because the clock is ticking and I want to cut this before we get cut off on the time. If you really want, and I strongly recommend, to go check out the rest of his pieces. I believe he has 15 total. 15 pieces?
15, yeah, sorry, 15. I got my mouth.
He's eating. Go check out his website, www.hawaiiancient.com, and you can see all the amazing work on that page. On top of that, if you know any local artists that have a story to share and have art that they want to express with the world, please send them and tell them, shoot an email to us at kamaka@islandconnection.com, and we can work on that and hopefully bring on more talent onto the show and be able to continually share what Hawaii has to offer.
We're on Facebook also.
On top of that, we also have Facebook pages that we want you to check out. Hawaii Ancient?
No, Ancient Hawaii.
Ancient Hawaii Facebook page, Hawaii Culture and Retail Association Facebook page, as well as Aloha Authentic Facebook page. On that note, have a good day, and we'll check you guys out later next month on our next episode. Aloha.
See you.
Aloha.
See the spirit of aloha through the arch with aloha.